Hi there, and welcome to the fifth episode on YouTube of Israel Explained. Today we're going to talk about the possibility of another hostage deal. So the previous hostage deal ended for two reasons. It was slated to go on for at least 4 days, ended up going for more, but it didn't reach the 10 days that were the absolute maximum. And the reason it didn't reach the 10 days was because Hamas ran out women and children, and that was the main criteria for the exchange, or at least they said they ran out. They said they couldn't locate the remaining ones. There have been some suspicions that they're trying to cover up rapes and sexual abuse. The White House has also raised that as a possibility. Israel's insisted that it's not going to negotiate another hostage deal until that issue is resolved, until those people are released. Meanwhile, Hamas has said that as long as fighting continues, it's not willing to discuss a ceasefire either. So officially, we're at an impasse. Israel withdrew its contingent from Qatar that was headed by the Mossad and also representatives of the IDF. And they said for a while that they're not even willing to accept any new offers from the interlocutors for it, from the mediators, which are primarily Qatar and to a lesser degree Egypt as well. But Channel 12 and Sky News in Arabic broke a story today saying that Israel is now willing to accept new offers, or at least to talk to mediators. A source told Channel 12, a highly ranked Israeli source, I don't know who, it's an anonymous source, gave the following quote to Channel 12: "The conditions have ripened for new agreements, both from the perspective of Israel and that of Hamas." So currently there's 138 hostages in Gaza. There are some reports that 10 or 20 of them are dead. I can't confirm that, but I'm certain that some of them unfortunately are. Another element to the fact that Israel's willing to listen to offers right now is that the families are putting a lot of pressure on the government um, in meetings between government representatives and the families of the hostages. But we also saw some mass demonstrations in Tel Aviv, um, basically calling for the government to do whatever it takes to release the hostages. Uh, we also learned from the testimony of the hostages that were released in the last deal that they're being held, in some cases, in absolutely terrible conditions. And so there's concern that hostages with health conditions, and there are plenty of them, or hostages who have developed health conditions while in captivity, maybe don't have that much time until there's a new deal. And that also adds to the urgency that Israel feels to release the hostages. And as we know, it's a real soft point for Israel. Israel's been willing to release massive amounts of prisoners, terrorists, in order to get a single hostage back. The worst deals were the Gilad Shalit and Elchanan Tenenbaum ones, where Israel released a lot of terrorists to receive one person. In Shalit's case, over 1,000, including Yehia Sinwar. But as we saw in the last deal, they managed to lower the price to a prisoner ratio of 1 to 3. But Hamas has said that once there's soldiers involved, that ratio is going to change. So therefore, it really matters whether the next deal will be focused on soldiers or will be focused on women and children, etc. What Israel said to the mediators and in leaks to the media is that it's looking for to focus on two categories of hostages. One is the women and children that were left behind in the previous deal. It's going to insist that before any other category is released, those individuals will be released. They're vulnerable. Some of them might have experienced sexual abuse, etc. The other category that they're very interested in getting released are the sick and injured hostages for the reasons that I already explained. So Dedi Barnea, the head of the Mossad, has been given instructions that if there's an offer that comes through Egypt or Qatar, he should listen to it. But Israel has not gone as far as putting a detailed plan on the table. And one of the reasons for that, maybe the main reason for that, is the timing. Right now, the war is going very well for Israel. The two neighborhoods, main neighborhoods, Sajawiyah and Jabalia in Gaza City, that still have strongholds of Hamas are on the verge of collapse. I'm hearing a day or two. Khan Yunis is undergoing some intense fire right now, and I think Israel would like to finish off Khan Yunis before it takes this next step. And the reason I'm saying this is because what the leaks are saying is that they don't want to agree to any deal in the next week. So they want to use momentum over the next week to drive into Han Yunis and have those strongholds fall. Then they're hoping the terms for a new deal can improve. Now, Sinwar, who is the commander of Hamas in Gaza in practice, him and Muhammad Def, but Def is in the shadows, has been the obstacle to a lot of these deals. He is always looking to toughen up the terms. So Israel's hoping that Sinwar, if he's not killed over the next week, will be put under so much pressure that he'll agree to another deal. So um, there are some problems, though, with a new deal that might not have existed previously. So an Israeli source said that on the one hand, the ferocity of the fighting is opening a path to a deal that we should not miss. But on the other hand, the ferocity of the fighting has fractured Hamas command. If in the first deal, Hamas was often saying we can't locate people, we don't have power on the ground to find and communicate with ourselves. Israel was doubtful if that was true, but now it would definitely be true. Why do we know? There's been a wave of surrenders of Hamas terrorists. They've been telling Israeli investigators that one of the main reasons they're surrendering is because they can't communicate with headquarters, they can't get supplies, and they have no idea what they're supposed to do. So we know for a fact that Hamas operatives are not in communication with main headquarters, which means that locating the hostages may be very difficult. Could also be, unfortunately, there might be hostages who are dead and Hamas headquarters doesn't even know about that. Some of the messengers and the channels that were used to find hostages and to talk to Qatar, to talk to Egypt, are dead. Israel killed them in the operation, whether intentionally or unintentionally. I don't know. Even communicating with Hamas and Qatar has become more difficult. Some of the leaders there are in hiding. Other leaders have left because they're concerned that the Mossad might assassinate them. Now, as far as whether I think this deal is a good idea, I think timing is everything. I was very skeptical about the previous deal. The main problem I had with the previous deal was that I wasn't sure Israel would ever be able to get another attack off the ground. But at this point, Israel's proven the ability to stop fighting and come back with a vengeance. And that makes the idea of having another hostage deal seem much more attractive to people who want Israel to win the war against Hamas. Hamas also proved that when they're under duress, they will release hostages. Even though there were some dirty tricks, plenty of dirty tricks, ultimately Israel managed to get the hostages on a daily basis as it demanded. It proved tough when it had to be. And overall, when we see the families reunited, it's hard to argue that that wasn't a success. So, under the right conditions, another deal is going to be a good idea. But timing is everything. And that's, I'm encouraged by the fact that the Israelis are saying it's not going to happen over the next week. I think that that's because they want to complete certain operational goals before them, most likely Khan Yunis. If they can do that, this deal may be a very good idea. Something else to think about is the clock that the United States has placed on this operation to some extent. If there's a ceasefire now for 6, 7 days or something like that, Israel should demand that that time be added to the amount of time allocated to it to complete this operation from a diplomatic standpoint. It can't really afford, if the war is supposed to end at the beginning of January, to now give up a week in which it's not going to achieve any of its military goals. So that's something very important to think about. So, as far as this deal is concerned, in the abstract, if Israel can get a good ratio of prisoners to the released and not stop its momentum and manage to make sure that it doesn't have the time off the clock, getting another deal is probably a good idea, even though this time I think Israel is probably going to have to release more dangerous prisoners than it did in the past. So we'll be keeping a close eye on the possibility of another hostage deal being announced. Right now, it's in its nascency, but that could change the entire dynamic of the war. So it's something very important to keep an eye on. It's a new factor introduced today. So I wanted to talk about it quickly in today's video. So I had a couple of questions, as always, great questions about the previous episode. If you remember, the previous episode was about the possibility that Israel might launch a war in Lebanon. And that possibility has only increased in the last 24 hours. There's been more talk about it. So it's very relevant, and we'll be keeping an eye on that too. So, friend of the show, Fred, asked the following question. It's a bit long. Back in 1978 and again in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon because of cross-border attacks by PLO terrorists. This was primarily rocket fire and some incursions. This is why Israel occupied the region south of the Litani River, even using an allied force known as the SLA. With the 2006 war, the goal was to push Hezbollah north of the Litani River. While this was initially accomplished, there have been 30,000 violations recorded by UNIFIL that show that this eventually fell apart. As long as Hezbollah operates south of the Litani, it can use mortars and short-range rockets to attack northern towns and cities inside Israel, much like what Hamas did from Gaza. So I think Israel knows that its strategic goal in Lebanon can be to demilitarize the area south of the Litani, so any rockets or missiles launched from Lebanon can be intercepted by Iron Dome and other defense systems. Do you think this is an achievable goal for Israel? Well, short answer to a long question, no. I don't think that is an achievable goal for Israel. I don't see how Israel can guarantee that the area to the south of the Litani be demilitarized. As you said in your question, as you noted in your question, Israel's been trying to do that against different organizations, first the PLO, then Hezbollah, since the late 70s, since before I was born. They've been trying to do that. It's impossible to do without a massive presence in the south of Lebanon. Israeli presence in the south of Lebanon proved too costly. And Israel wasn't even in to the Litani. It was in a security zone of a few miles. I think it was 3 miles or something like that. And it used the SLA to try to expand that, but it was incredibly costly. Trying to occupy Lebanon up until the Litani would be even more costly. There's going to be no SLA this time because of what happened to them last time. They had to be evacuated and some of them were slaughtered. And as we know, international groups don't have the wherewithal and the ability and the political will to fight against Hezbollah. The only possible hope Israel has is to somehow pressure Lebanon into doing it for them. But I find it hard to believe that that would ever work. I don't think Lebanon has the will to go to civil war against Hezbollah. And even if it did, which I don't think it does, I don't think it has the capability. The Lebanese army is not strong. Lebanon is on the verge of collapse. I just don't see it. I think that Israel is in a no-win situation in Lebanon. That's why I'm known for my my hawkish views on Gaza, but I'm much less hawkish on Lebanon because I don't actually see that a military escalation would achieve anything lasting in Lebanon. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope Israel has better plans than I do, because I do not have good ideas for Lebanon. I'm much more optimistic about what's happening in Gaza. Another friend of the show, Yael, asks the following question. I'm going home for most of January to be with the family. I definitely don't want a war with Lebanon to start then, and I really don't want a war with Hezbollah. because it will be a terrible one. But I don't think it's up to them or the Lebanese. It's totally up to Iran, in my opinion. I have been hearing about an all-out war with Hezbollah forever, and after seeing that deterrence doesn't work, how can it with cult-like enemies? I feel like the situation must change. Question: do you think it would matter in which season Israel actually started it? And do you think that Bibi would have the nerve to do it? Okay, lot to unpack there. I think Iran has a lot of say in whether there'll be a war in Lebanon, but I don't think they have a veto. Now that more has been clarified about what happened with Hamas in Gaza, it increasingly seems like Iran signed off on it, but didn't necessarily plan it and didn't necessarily determine the exact time contours of the operation. So it's a little bit like Israel's relationship with the United States. When it launches an operation, it really wants to make sure the US is on board. But that doesn't mean that the plan is actually concocted by the Iranians. It's just important that they approve it. And if Iran says to one of its proxies, go to war, and that proxy doesn't want to, it's not really clear that Iran can force them to do so. And we've definitely seen Hezbollah be much more restrained vis-a-vis Israel since it got involved in that war in Syria. Whether Iran wants them to be more aggressive with Israel or not, and I know that in certain points they did, Hezbollah has not been willing to. There's just too many obstacles regarding Syria, regarding internal domestic issues in Lebanon. So I don't think that Iran has the ultimate say there. I think Hezbollah does. Could be wrong. It's very difficult to understand the dynamic between those two actors. That would require a lot of information that I don't have. You said, does it matter in what season Israel actually started it? Well, I think one of the reasons Israel is talking about doing it now is because it's got momentum, it's already got US support, there's already US assets there. So it sort of feels like it would make more sense if that war started as an extension of the current crisis instead of everything dies down and then Israel all of a sudden starts a new crisis in a time of its own choosing. The US, which is having difficulty supporting us anyway, might find it even more difficult to support Israel if Israel starts something, even if it's against a terrible actor like Hezbollah. Israel starts it, Lebanon starts to collapse, Iran starts to draw in. It makes life very difficult for the US. So there are good arguments for doing it now. And I would support them if I felt like that military strike would actually accomplish something lasting. But as I said, I don't really see how, unfortunately. The other question is, do you think that Bibi would have the nerve to do it? Well, that's a great question. And those of us who know Israeli politics well, aside from like the propaganda you hear from foreign sources, know that Netanyahu is a person who really doesn't like to go to war. That's one of the reasons he put up with Hamas for as long as he did. He'd rather not go to war. He finds it to be risky. And even though he seemed to be managing this war quite well, it's just not something that he has ever felt very comfortable with. So on that level, you'd say Netanyahu might not have the nerve to do it. But on the other hand, he has an incentive to make this war go on for a long, long time. Because as the polls stand now, if the war stops, he would probably be removed. If there were elections, he would lose. But he's probably encouraged by the fact that in recent polls, his numbers have gone up just a little bit. And he's been talking a lot about how internal polls are showing some great improvement, which I don't believe. But I think he's seeing that his management of the war, which has been successful, has improved his popularity. And he might be hoping that if this war goes on forever, he may be able to resurrect his political fortunes. And in international relations theory, there's even articles about this, about it's called gambling for resurrection. If you're a leader and you're in domestic trouble, you might try to escalate wars and make wars in order to increase your domestic support. Of course, the problem with this is considering that he's responsible for the debacle leading to this war. If he was going to lead Israel into the kind of morass that I think a war in Lebanon would be, he would just be adding to his tarnished legacy and to his problems, not to mention throwing away all the success that Israel had in in Gaza. So I think he actually might have the nerve to do it, but he would have the nerve to do it for all the wrong reasons. Okay, so that's our episode for today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, leave them on the channel. Smash the subscribe button. Tell everyone you know about how great these videos are. And I will totally see you next time.